Hello everybody, it's Mike here at Game from Scratch, and welcome back to our ongoing Godot 3 tutorial series. Today we're going to be talking about 2D animation, specifically keyframed animation. And don't worry, I'll explain exactly what that means in just a second. Now before we jump in, I want to do a quick reminder. First off, all the assets for this, all the source code and resources used are available up on the Game from Scratch website. The link is down below. And then on top of that, if you are a patron, I am making a book on this subject, which will hopefully be available very soon. The 2D stuff is all done. We're moving on to 3D. But if you are a patron, you get early access to chapters as they are published. And then again, thank you for your support. All right, without further ado, let's jump right in. Now, I've already gone ahead and I've made a project. So this is a standard 2D Godot project. Now, you may notice the interface is evolving a bit as this series is going on. That's because I'm actually staying current to the most current version of the UI as Godot is released. And what we're going to do in our standard scene is animate something using keyframes. Now, that something we're going to animate is specifically a sprite. It could be just about anything. That's the power of keyframing, a very cool feature. And let's ignore the fact that animated sprite exists. That's a different thing than what we were talking about today. So we're just going to use our standard icon like so, drop this guy in, and there you go. We have a sprite in our scene, and now we want to go ahead and animate it. That means over time we want it to move. And what you'd often want to do is say move this around the scene. So we could say want to go frame 1, have it here, frame 15, have it here, frame 30, have it here. Well, you don't want to do 30 frames of animation by going, frame 0, frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, frame 5, frame 6. All you want to do is say, I want you to do a frame here, and a frame here, and let the computer figure out what needs to happen to make what you did work. And those are what we're calling keyframes. Those are keyframes in the animation, and then the computer will interpolate the results in between to create a smooth animation over time for you. So, how do we do this? Well, first off, let's move this guy back to the origin. We're going to obviously need, this is Godot after all, we need a node for this. And what we need is an animation player. Like so. And you'll notice the second we created that animation player, a new tab showed up down here called animation. Now this is kind of cool. This is actually going to be your timeline. This is where your animation occurs. So let's look at configuring it. So first thing we need to do is actually create an animation. So come down here and click the animation button right here. That opens up a menu, and then we'll create a new animation. And we're just going to cause a bounce. We're going to cause this guy to fall to the bottom of the screen, shrink down, and then bounce back up. So let's zoom this guy out a little bit. So we're going to go boing, boing, boing over time. So now that you see we've created a new animation, we have this timeline here. This is our total duration of our animation. You can see our steps. So each one of these steps that the animation goes by is in 0.1 increments, or sorry, snapping. Here you see the total duration of our animation. So if we want our animation to be 2 seconds long, we just change that out to 2. And there you see the grayed area is the active area of our animation. We can zoom in and out like this so we can get more detail or less detail as we go. And then once again, this is the amount that we're stepping by within the animation. So if we want to step at 0.5, we change that down. And then as we go through our animation, we will jump by half, as you can see right there. So let's go back to the beginning. We'll leave this at 0.01 for now. Oops, do not want 0. That is not good. All right, so now that we've got our animation player set up and an animation defined, we need to actually go ahead and animate something. So first thing we need to do is add a track. So we come down here, see add track, click that, and then you can pick what kind of track you want to add. Now, most of the time it's going to be a property track, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And then it's going to say, okay, what node's property are we going to be animating? We're going to be animating our sprite, so select it. And then we can pick the value within our sprite. So what we want to do is go down and locate position and click OK. But you notice almost any value can be changed over time in the animation. That's the power of both Godot system and keyframing. So now we've got the ability to define. See, in our timeline here, we have our position available now. And we could go through its history. So very first spot right here, now we need to go ahead and create a keyframe. We want to actually do a keyframe right where we began, at 0, 0, where we start. So we're just going to come down here, right click here and say insert key. So now this is going to have a property value. You'll see over here, if we select it in the inspector, at value, at time 0, the value is 1 and -3. So we probably want that to actually be consistent. So we'll go 1 and 1. Actually, probably 0 and 0 makes more sense. So we'll move this guy back to the actual origin. All right, so that is our initial key. Now what we're going to want to do is say right around the, just a sec, right around the halfway mark. So we'll go to the 1 here. We're just going to go ahead and just move this guy down to right here. And then we will right click again and insert another key. And then what we want to do is move to about the end state. So right about 2. We'll move this guy back to about the origin, like so. And finally insert another key. And we are done. Now we can go ahead and we can play this animation at any time. Come on. Oh, let's track this back to 0. So there, you see there our animation goes and is done. We can also play it in reverse, which is hard to tell, but that is actually the same animation in reverse. And another thing that's very, very common is we can loop. So if we want to have this animation play itself again, automatically, when it gets to the end, it will just keep playing. And that's what this guy over here does. Now, one of the things that's very valuable when you're working with this kind of stuff is you want to see how it's changing over time. And that is where something called onion skinning comes in handy. Now, what we can do is we can turn on onion skinning. And what this will do is basically draw the previous frames of animation. We can actually say multiple previous frames of animation. So say 3 steps, and we can do it in the past or in the present. So now you'll see, as I pause the animation, there's the last frame, the frame before that, and the frame before that. It's a nice way of being able to debug exactly how your animation is working. So you're going to see when we do the bounce back. All right, let's see. You'll see the last couple of frames of animation as they occurred. Now, so far, we've only animated a single property. Right here, we animated the position only. So now let's go ahead and add another track to our animation. So just come up here and say, property track, our sprite again, and this time we're going to do a bit of a squash right when we're about to hit, when we hit, and then when we're done hitting. So I'm going to come here and go scale, like so, and we're going to move to about the 0.8 mark, like that. And I'm just going to create a scale key, so we're at our normal position. We'll go back to 0, 1. I will create a scale key here, so we always start at the normal position. And then what we're going to do is jump forward in time to 1.2. So this is after the bounce. So let's go 1.2-ish right there. And we will set a scale key once again. So these are all, every one of these keys were at our normal size. And we're going to come back here again, and we will set a key as well. So all of those times we will be our full happy self. Now what I'm going to do is come in here to the 1 key, and we're going to go ahead and create and insert a key here. And now at that value, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to squish. So we'll go down to a 0.6. So this way you get kind of a bounce effect as our animation plays. And you'll notice here that this guy is slightly offset from this guy. So I actually want to change it. Well, you can just grab a keyframe and move it, and that will change it in the timeline. Or you can grab it and edit it up this way. So now we have this nice new position in the middle. So here, let's see, we'll be at 1 and 1 for scale. And then at the apex of our animation, we're going to squish. And then after we finish bouncing back up at the 1.2 mark, we'll be back to full size. So now when we go ahead and play this animation, let me just turn onion skinning off. You'll now see we come up, we start to bounce, and there you see you got to squish in. So you can do multiple tracks. You can animate multiple properties of a single object, no problem on an animation player. All right. Now, another thing I should point out at this point in time, so far we've done translation and scaling, and there's also rotation. Those are the 3 most common, by far, methods of keyframing. So you're going to want to keyframe things, the movement of things, so commonly that there is a shortcut. So instead of having to go sprite, add track, etc., you can actually toggle these guys right here. So if over time we wanted to say we want to move and just get the location of this guy as it moves. I turn location on, so that's toggled in blue, and then you simply set the location you want it to be framed at. So you see we've already got a track here for position, but if I wanted to, I could come here, and then I just click this key right there, and it will automatically create a key there. So when you're creating these things, you can do it very, very quickly for location, rotation, and scale by just clicking up here, and it will automatically create the keyframe where you're at. So as you saw, we got this new keyframe in here. It's going to screw up our bouncing animation like you wouldn't believe. But it does show you can quickly create multiple different tracks up here in the user interface using these guys. So these are toggles. So right now, if I click this guy, I will create a rotation and location scale key at that position in time when I click the little key icon there. And then as you saw, we created this key that we really don't want there. You could just select it and hit delete. and it's gone. Okay, so that is the basics of creating keyframes. Now, remember earlier on I showed you could have different tracks. So tracks all share the same timeline in the animation player, but what we can do is add another track in here. So we saw early on, let me just go back in time to 0, 0 before we continue. I come here and go, we could have created, so we've created a property track so far. What I'm gonna do now is create a call method track. And what we're gonna do is just play a sound when we hit the 1 second mark of our animation, so when we're bouncing, I'm going to put just a simple sound playback function in there. And you'll notice later on that we're going to do this another way as well, but I just want to showcase how this can be done. And this is some pretty powerful stuff. So what I'm going to do, come up here and go audio stream player, like that guy right there. We need a stream. I already got a wave file that I copied in earlier, so I'll just drag this guy over here to our stream, like so. And now what we're going to do is when we hit the 1 second mark, so right here, we're going to call a new track. So odd track, call method track. And it's going to call the method audio stream player. And we're going to just go to the 1 second mark right there and insert a key. I keep missing. There we go. And now what you're going to do is tell it where or what function to call at that point in time. Now you could call multiple functions in the same object over time, but here what we've just basically said is at the 1 second mark, call this function. Now this is going to go along with all of these tracks that we've already defined. So let's go ahead and play this out. Actually, it should work in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to 0 and play. All right, I'm clearly doing something wrong. Let me just check myself 1 second. Okay, I have the combination of stupidity things on my end. For some reason, this guy was set up to use mythical headphones that I actually don't have attached. So I switched back to the proper source, and I actually get playback. The other thing is it's not playing directly in the editor for some reason, so I actually have to play it to get things to work. So we're going to go ahead and save our scene and run this example so we can see that soundtrack playing. Now, before I move on, I want to actually show you how to do that. So right now, we've created an animation player. Now, you can do this in code, but what I'm going to do is just basically say when this animation player plays, you'll notice over here on the right, we've got animation player. We can say current animation, and we'll say bounce. Like this, and then you've got this little toggle right down here, which is autoplay on load. So when this animation comes in, this guy will automatically play. Our bounce will automatically start. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and run our scene. I've already saved it, so here we go ahead and run it, and you'll see blink. When we hit the bottom, blink, blink. Okay, so that is how you can call an audio function in the timeline. Now, well, the cool thing here is, so select our audio stream player again, go back to here to animation, let's stop that guy so it's not so distracting. And done. Okay, what you'll notice here is when I created this key here for this this play function, so we'll select it, and you'll notice over here there is a selection called arc, so you can actually pass in parameters when you're calling function. Now the cool thing is we don't need to pass a parameter into this particular function, but if your function did in fact require parameters, so what you picked when you created this keyframe here, so this function right here, if it required multiple parameters, you just set this up to however many parameters you want to pass in with this keyframe, and here you can set the type and the value. So if you needed a string, so if you just wanted to log something out whenever something happened, you could send in a string value and whatever the value you wanted it to be. So pretty straightforward there. Just do be aware that if you are passing parameters into a function call, you do need to define them here in the properties. So that is one way to do things. Now I'll show you a couple things in this next step. First off, you can get rid of a track by clicking there. So now that whole call function track is gone, and you could use that track to basically call any function on any node. So the abilities are really, really powerful. So for example, if in your animation you had a collision test and it hit something, you could have that function automatically update the health on the thing that was hit, for example. You can really script a lot of stuff in the animation player. But let's show you another option here. We've got audio playback track. So this is basically the same thing. You're going to still need your audio stream player, so we'll just select that. And then now at the 1 second mark, we're just going to go ahead, right click and insert a key. And this is basically just shorthand for what we just did. Now we could say at that point, play the bounce string. And you can see now you've actually got some details of the waveform that is going to be played. So you can actually have some an overlay or an idea of how the sound is going to go. So if you want to synchronize your animation to as the sound gets louder, you have this visualization down here. And this result and this creation and this track that we just created is going to be the exact same thing as what we just did a second ago with the call function. So pretty powerful stuff you can do here. Now, you saw earlier on, I set with the animation, so go back to my animation player. You'll notice over here, current animation isn't set, and I have set this guy to auto load on start. Now, let's look at actually doing this with a script instead. So we're gonna come back here to my node, and we will attach a script to this guy. So, all right, go ahead. And what we want to do, I suppose that is in ready. So let's get rid of all this gibberish. Really got to start selecting the template that doesn't create the comments that I end up deleting anyways. So in our ready function, we're just going to go ahead and run the bounce script as it is. So we're going to get a reference to our animation player, and it's really this straightforward. Play, and then you'll notice you're getting code completion for the various different defined animations that you've named. So we'll go ahead and play bounce like this, and this is going to have the exact same result. So when our level is created, it will automatically play that script. Now that's interesting. Why am I still getting a sound? Because I deleted that, didn't I? Oh no, I didn't. All right, so that sound's still there. I'll get rid of that. So that gives you an idea of how you can actually script the animation player, and it's really straightforward. And the cool thing is, once again, you do get that full text completion, or text completion for parameters for the different animations that you've done, making it so you don't have to go and look back what you called things. It makes it a lot less error prone overall. Now you'll also notice there are a couple of animation events. So if we select our animation player, and we go over to node, you will notice we have animation changed, finished, and started. So we're just going to wire up finished and started. So actually, we'll just do finished in this case. So we've got that. We're going to wire it to our node 2D. All right, so we'll go ahead and connect that. And then all we'll do right here is print out. So print, and we've got animation, blah, blah, blah. Oh, let's put a space there. Plus, and then you're seeing we're getting passed in the name of the animation that is actually playing. So anim name, and then finished play. And then we'll go ahead and run that. And down here you will see absolutely nothing. So why is that? Well, that's pretty straightforward. That is because if we go to our animation player, we have it on an infinite loop. So if you're going to code some logic so that when one animation ended, you wanted to say start another animation, this is how you would check. So you would check for your animation played, and then at that point you could play a different animation using, say, this code right up here. So now that we've actually got it so it's not in on an infinite loop, that means it can in fact finish. So there you see, we ran once, animation bounced, finished playing. And at that point in time, you could put in whatever kind of logic you needed to control your animations. Now, a very common task you're going to want to do when you're dealing with animations is actually to blend two animations together. For example, you may have a walking animation and a jumping animation, and you want to transition from one to the next. So instead of just, playing to the next animation, you probably want to do a smooth blend somehow. Well, don't worry. Godot also makes this quite simple. Now, first off, we're going to obviously need a second animation. So I'm going to show you how to create a second animation, and we're actually going to use this guy. So we're going to create a location, rotation, and scale one, and we're just going to move this guy rolling over to this point. So right now we have a bounce that goes this way, and we're going to do a roll that goes this way. So just come down here, select, make sure you're at keyframe 00, everything's set up right how you want it to go. Come to animation and say new, and we're going to say roll right, as soon as I learn how to spell. And then what we'll do is immediately create a keyframe. And we're good? All right, so now what we want to do is over the timeline of our animation, which I'm going to make the same length as our first one, I'm going to go roughly each quarter, and I'm going to insert a new key. So I'm just going to move this guy over this way, and we will rotate this guy by 90 degrees, and keyframe. All right, do this at the 1 second mark. Once again, roll him to about the halfway mark. Oops. Come on, back open. And we'll change this guy out to 180 and keyframe. And then kind of repeat and rinse. So 1.5, move this over a little bit, and 270 and keyframe. And this actually can screw up a bit in some systems. I'm not sure what it's going to do to me. I will set this guy back to 0. Hopefully that will rotate in the correct direction. And keyframe. So now we have a roll right animation. We can see it in action right here. Yeah, it did not like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that last keyframe. And let's see, go timeline, last keyframe, and we will change the rotation on that one to 359. That way we don't snap backwards like we did right there. Make sure that keyframe took. And now let's go ahead and play that backwards. Oh, now it's being stupid. Okay, let's try this again. Roll. All right, so here, keyframe was 270. It did not take. All right, so let's change that back. 359 and done. All right, so now let's see. There we go. We got the smooth rotation that we want. So now we have this animation left to right while rolling. Not the smoothest animation in terms of the way that I created the keyframes, but you can see we've got a roll going on. So now what we want to do is blend those two together. In order to do this, we need yet another node. Come up to the node 2D up here and create a new child node. And we want an animation tree player like this. Go ahead and create that. Now this guy still needs a player, so we've got the animation player all ready to go. And now this guy can be used to work with multiple animations and make them interact correctly. You'll notice the second I created that animation tree player, with it selected, down here we have a new tab, the animation tree. And you're seeing the animation tree is invalid. Well, this is a normal graph, kind of like a shader graph or a visual graph, and this is your output. And now what we got to do is bring in some inputs. So first one, we're going to bring in an animation node. So click that plus icon. Bring in the first animation. In this particular case, we want it to be our bounce. And then we're going to need our second animation, which in this case is our roll right. And now what we're going to do is blend them together. So we can blend two, 3 or 4. We're going to just do a blend of 2 nodes. So this, see, we've got 2 inputs and 1 output. So we go here and like that and like here and like that. And then ultimately take the result of that blend and send it over here like this. So now we've created, you'll see our animation tree is now happy. We can click this guy and preview it. So now what you're seeing is, well, to be honest, you're just seeing our first animation. And that is because this is a blend. So now what we do is click this edit guy right here, and you will see there is this bar. From 0, this is 100% of the first animation. I go all the way to the right, and we click play. You will see it is just our second animation. What's cool here is we can take this guy and put it somewhere in the middle. And now when we play it, we're going to blend our bounce and our roll together. So that is how you can use an animation tree player to work multiple animations in together. Now, there's a lot more to this guy, but I'm not going to get into much more detail with it yet. And when we get back into the 3D topic of animation, I will revisit this particular subject. Now let's look at some code quickly to actually control this animation tree in action. So first thing we're going to need to do is some input handling. So project settings, input map, and we're just going to go ahead and create 1 and 2. Now, if you don't remember what we're doing right here, do be sure to go check the input section earlier on. So go ahead, create a new key. Key is the 1 key. And for 2, go ahead and create another key and 2 key. All right, so on the 1 key, we're going to fire off action event 1. On the 2 key, we're going to fire off action event 2. And let's shut that down. We're happy and we're good. Let's go back over here to our script. And now we have a lot of code to write. So in our process, what we are going to do is if input.is, oh, why did I do this? All right, I'm going to stay consistent with what I did on my own example. So key B. So if we press the B key, we want to play our bounce animation. So I'm going to get rid of this guy and this guy. This is all new code here. So when we press the B key, we're going to go if AnimationPlayer dot is playing. So if we're currently playing an animation or currently not playing an animation, and then what we want to do is play AnimationPlayer dot play. Same logic as before. Basically, we're just going to say when we hit the B key, play the bounce animation, and let's put some logic in here. So bouncing. All right, so when we hit the B key, we are going to now bounce. Let's go ahead and make sure that that actually worked. All right, so we got autoplay on our animation still. So let's go back here, animation player, roll right is off, animation tree player, active is on. Okay, we'll turn that back off and we'll go ahead and play this. So now we start and we do absolutely nothing. We hit the B key and we should be bouncing. Now this guy is stopped in a weird state. Give me 1 second. All right, so we'll reset this guy back to normal. This part can get kind of irritating. So we're gonna switch back here to our animation. Roll right, we'll reset that to 0. Bounce, we'll make sure that that's at 0. We'll run our code. Now we should be at the origin. All right, and hit the B key. Bouncing, but you're not bouncing, are you? No, you're not. Okay, 1 second. All right, folks, there is a valuable lesson here, especially when you're copying from code off screen. This guy, as you saw, when I said play before, it did an autocomplete of my animations, and I ignored that. I instead typed capital B bounce. It is important to realize that when you pass in the play event, it is case sensitive. So now, let's go on back to normal. Here we are with our scene, hit B, and then boom, our bounce animation is now playing. Every time we hit B, our bounce animation will play. All right, perfect. That's exactly what we want. So now let's handle our 1 and 2 key presses. So back to our if. So if input dot is action just pressed, no, released 1, like so. Now we're going to use our AnimationTreePlayer, AnimationTreePlayer dot active equals true. Var val equals AnimationTreePlayer. So what we're doing is getting a reference to that blend value. So animation.treeplayer blend. So we're accessing our blend 2D node, and we're saying get amount of blend 2. So this directly refers to blend 2. So that's what we're getting by name. So basically we're getting the blend amount of this particular value. But we don't really care too much about the value. What we want to do is go ahead and say if that particular value is greater than or equal to 0.1, and then we're going to set it. AnimationTreePlayer.blend 2D node set amount, and then we're going to pass it in blend 2 like what we did earlier, and then we're just going to pass in our value minus 0.1. So we're going to move, all we're basically doing with this line of code, so this line of code is checking to see what the current value is. This line of code is essentially the exact same thing as coming in here and dragging this slider to the left. And that's it. And we'll start with it full bounce. So that's what that particular code is doing. And now we're going to do the exact same thing, but if we press the number 2, we're going to do it in reverse. That's not what I want. Come on. Actually, everything is right except for my if. All right, there we go. So if we want 2, true. Let's try that again with the right spelling. All right, so if we just hit 2, then we just want to go ahead and check instead to see that this is less than or equal to less than or equal to 0.9, and then we'll change that from a negative to a positive. Now in theory, we should be able to blend between the two. Now another thing we can actually do is track what our current animation state is. So let me just go to the end of this line right here. And now we're just gonna go, where did counter come from? 1 sec. All right, so we're gonna go up here and say var counter equals 0. And what we're gonna do is every 100 milliseconds or every 10th of a second, we're gonna just debug out what just happened. So counter plus equals delta. This is the amount of time that elapsed per frame. And then we're gonna say if counter is greater than 0.1, so if 10 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds has elapsed, then what we want to do is check, see if we are currently playing an animation. Is playing. And if we are, we will simply print out cur anim time remaining. Oops, let me just put a space in there. So get the current animation length minus AnimationPlayer dot current animation position. So all we're going to do is every 100th of a second or 100 milliseconds, we're going to print out the current remaining time in our animation. And I'm sorry about my phone, it is obscenely loud. All right, so what am I missing here? I'm missing a closed bracket, I believe. Let me just check that off. And let's turn counter into the right value. All right, so that should theoretically be all good. Yeah, so let's go check, see how badly I mangled my code. So let's go ahead and run this. So now you see, we hit B, we'll bounce, and I can hit, so B, and then I'll start hitting 2, and you will see we blend between the animations. So hit B again, and we can go back to the first. So, all right. I clearly screwed something up here. All right, so I'm going to tweak things slightly. So I'm switching it up so that both animations loop. So our rolling animation is constantly looping. Our bouncing animation is constantly looping. I'm going to grab my tree player and make sure that it is active. So we're not going to have to trigger it using this bounce logic. This way, it will just basically repeat over and over again. It can show the blend a little bit better. So there we go. So we're running 100% of the first animation in the straight up bounce. Now I'm going to hit the 2 key, and now we've blended in. So we've got 10% of the roll and move right key. So I'm going to move a little bit more. And now you'll see we're a little bit more of the roll and move right, hit again, hit again, hit again, hit again, hit again. And now we're basically 100%, well, 90% rolling to the right. Now I'm going to start hitting the 1 key, and then we're going to start blending our animation back towards the straight up and down animation. And that's because this logic should probably actually be 1. And that did not allow me to go to 100% of the second blend. So there you go. We'll switch it over, and there we are. Full animation 2, and then I'll hit the 1 key, full animation 1. So you can see how you can blend between 2 active animations. Pretty cool stuff, pretty powerful. Once again, the stuff that you can do using keyframed animation in Godot is actually quite staggering. Let me just shut that down then. And yeah, you know what? I'm going to leave it there. So we're going to cover some of this stuff again. We're going to get a little bit more into the animation tree stuff when we get into 3D animations. It's a little bit more useful in that regard. But I think you already saw just how powerful everything is that we've dealt with. So it's kind of amazing the degree of animation tools that are built into the Godot system. Now, the only thing I didn't show you that I really would like to at this point in time, let's go back to our animation, and you'll see when I have the animation tab track. So we can see right here, so far we are just animating this particular guy. Now, what we could potentially want to do as part of this animation, and coincidentally, if you have multiple animation sets, you're going to need multiple animation players. Just do be aware of that. You can't reuse the same player to create separate concurrent animations. So if you want to have 2 concurrent animations on 2 different sets of objects, you're going to have to create multiple animation players. But there's no problem having multiple animation players in the scene. But while I actually have the animation player selected like this, you'll notice everything in the scene, everything has these little keys beside it. So I can compare my sprite, and you see we've got all these keys beside it. At the same time, I could go ahead and create a new, let's create another sprite. I could create another sprite in the world like this, and you'll notice all of its keys are set too. So if we wanted to, I could go ahead and let's actually make this sprite to sprite. So let's go ahead and give this guy a texture, like so. Move him over a little bit. So we've got our one animation going on this, so this bounce animation, we've got this going on, but what I could do is go ahead and say, so let's pause this sucker. Let's move to here. Let's turn that annoying ass looping off. And what I'm going to do is go to about the, okay, we'll go to the one spot. So I got my second object in the scene set. I come over here and I'm just going to click a key on visibility. It's right there at the 0 mark. It is visible. I'm going to go to the 1 mark like so, and I'm going to click my little key again. Created a second key, and you'll notice there's a toggle right here. It shows that we can check it on and off. I can actually set the value right there in that toggle. We'll go ahead and click that guy, and now at that frame, it is not visible. So if we go ahead and play this guy, we now have a second sprite in scene. Boop. and it disappears. So you can keyframe off of any value that has that little keyframe beside it. As long as you've got the animation player selected, you can key it that way. Now, one other last thing I didn't show, and I suppose I really should have, is easing. Now, you'll notice here, for example, we kind of came in on this. So I'll get rid of this sprite completely. It's not really relevant. Now, the cool thing is when I delete it, it automatically gets rid of all of the tracks attached to it. But you'll notice this guy. So as we were coming down, so we get to the this key right here. Yeah, so bounce. Let's move to here. When we set that key, let me just go back to AnimationTreePlayer, turn that guy off, go back to my animation player. All right, so right when we were here, you'll notice this key right there, we kind of come in and then we immediately start squishing to this point, right? And all of our squishing, and let me throw an onion skinning on so you can really see what's going on here. So in the next couple frames, it's going to be a linear squish. So we just did a straight out squish going on between that key and that key. It's literally just completely smooth. And that's because of these guys right here. So we can set the blending mode or the property of that key. So I'm going to grab this key right here, and you'll notice something called easing. And watch this. So this is the last 3 frames, and this is how smoothly we blend between the previous key and our current key. So our easing is 1. That means we've got a linear blend going on. But if we wanted to like front load or back load how fast this translation happens, we can just move this guy like this. And now let's track that out. And then you will see the effect kicked in much later. We can also do the exact opposite, and we can key it out this way. So now when our animation goes, we're going to have it, we're going to stay pretty much full square, and then squish. So you can use these easing lines to basically determine how fast or how to do the blend transition between 2 keyframes. And you've also got options over here for how to do those blends. So some pretty powerful tools built into Godot for 2D animation, especially this keyframe stuff. And I could get into a whole lot more detail here, but I am not going to. That is it for now. That is quite a bit covered in this particular subject. Hopefully you found that useful. Please let me know, comments down below if you have any questions. And again, when we get back into 3D, I will revisit this topic to a certain degree. Okay, I will talk to you all later. Goodbye for now.